Like other denominations, the Presbyterian Church USA has congregations that are thriving and other congregations that are struggling. And smaller churches are often anchors in communities that would truly be missed if they were no longer there. The Mission Committee of the Presbytery of Chicago has created a special program to provide funding and develop programming for these smaller churches. To tell us more, we have Lisa Dagger. She's the moderator of the Presbytery of Chicago's Mission Committee. And we welcome Kathy Winterstrom. She's the coordinator of the Salary Supplement and Small Church Grant Programs. Welcome. If you could tell us a bit more about the Presbytery's Salary Supplement, the Small Church Program, and kind of what all that entails.
The Salary Supplement Program was begun in 2019 when we identified that through the Mission Committee we could serve our churches in various ways. One of those ways is by distributing grant money through sort of standard mission grant requests. And then the other was to help these churches sort of help themselves. And we recognized at that point that every congregation sort of reaches a point in their life together where it would be helpful for them to examine how they do what they do, how they are as a church, where they are as a church on a whole bunch of different levels. And so we established the Salary Supplement Program with some legacy funding and directed programming to help churches kind of walk themselves through the process of self-discernment, I guess.
So not just the funds, but also the education, the understanding of how to utilize those funds.
Yeah, and that's a key distinction between the Salary Supplement Program and the Small Church Program. Both of them have a level of commitment on the part of the church and session and leaders, but only the Salary Supplement Program includes some funding.
Okay. Very good. So Lisa, tell us about the Mission Committee. How does this all kind of work together with this?
Sure. So the Mission Committee was convened in 2018, and we started making our first grants in 2019. The Salary Supplement Program, thanks to Kathy for taking it on, we realized very quickly was going to demand a lot more time because of the programmatic aspects related to it. It also is the program that has the most funding allocated to it, because the grants that churches get are $35,000 each over a period of 3 years. They get that funding over 3 years. They have to submit some reports and a kind of an interim application to make sure they're staying on track, but $35,000 a year for 3 years with the churches. And that funding is really a cycle of life thing. So a lot of denominations are seeing churches closing, and we're seeing that in the Presbytery of Chicago too. And so the bulk of the funds that make up the program are coming from churches that have closed and whose assets are held in trust with the Presbytery, and to utilize some of those funds to really help churches who are on the cusp of kind of deciding whether they're on decline or whether there's opportunity for them to connect more deeply within their communities and grow. And so the programming is part of what helps them to discern that. The funding helps them be relieved of part of the reason we called it Salary Supplement, be relieved of some of the costs associated with having a full-time pastor in a smaller church, so that they could dream and really spend time in their communities determining what the needs are and how they might be able to meet those needs as a congregation.
How did churches respond when COVID happened and various needs that came out because of that?
They responded very well, and in the midst of the changes that they had to do. And I would say with that first cohort, they were able to form very strong leadership teams. These leadership teams were able to conduct small group meetings with their congregations. They went through the process, a huge process of discernment, very structured small group meetings that kind of led them down a path of discerning where they are now. And I think that was key during that first summer of COVID. And again, these are congregations with varying sizes and serving very different surrounding communities as well.
And I think to answer your question about COVID, I think in some cases, some of the churches had a little bit harder time meeting the timelines, and I think that's the only thing we had to modify.
Yeah.
But the churches did really incredible work under really extraordinary circumstances. A couple of the churches just needed more time to complete the house meetings because they were learning how to use Zoom. Yeah.
As were we all.
As were we all.
So with that then, and I mean, COVID to today, the churches, I'll go back to Lisa, the churches that you've worked with, can you think of a drastic difference between them or obvious similarities, either of the two? That, I mean, as far as, is there a consistent, other than being smaller possibly, but a consistent theme with them or with the people that maybe you would tie together?
I think the consistent theme between all of the churches and all of the cohorts is they've had really strong leadership teams. Even the one church is coming to mind where it seemed like the leadership team was tired. I'm not going to mention their name because they've also done some incredible things, and that I'll mention. But all of them had really strong lay support for the activities that were required of the programming that helped them kind of map out what they saw as their future. But I have seen they've all done really different things with the information that they've gathered. So for instance, one church in the first cohort, it's Palatine Presbyterian Church, they determined that hunger was a need in their area. They figured out a way that they could meet it in terms of a food pantry that was manageable from their perspective. They applied for a regular mission grant. As I mentioned earlier, the mission committee does grants to congregations to do mission projects. And it was one of the biggest grants that we've made for a mission grant. And they're thriving. They're doing this. They're partnering with several different hunger-related small nonprofits in their area, and they're feeding people because that was the need that they determined was in their area. And it's really energized the core of that congregation.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and the pastor's really energetic and enthusiastic, and I'm sure that helps as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what, and I could add to that too. In our second cohort of churches, I'll back up. Part of the programming involves challenging each of these congregations to conceive of and strategize and plan for and then execute a new mission project in a very short time frame. We call that a 21-day challenge. And in our second cohort, there were some really significant new mission projects that came as a result of this little 21-day challenge, where one has a really thriving clothing ministry that is new to them. And then one of the churches also started a mental health initiative for their surrounding community. And in the end, when we challenged them to transition into a larger, more sustainable project, this became a sustainable project where people were trained, and there are a number of elements and a number of components to this mission, this mental health mission that they are sharing and going out into their community to share.
And that's Elk Grove and Vita Nueva, respectively, right?
Yeah.
How do you decide then who receives these grants? How does this work?
Each program has a pretty well-defined list of qualifications, so to speak. For example, for salary supplement, we do ask that there be a full-time pastor in place. There are sort of financial budgetary considerations. And so when churches apply for this, they know that they pretty much fit the parameters of that particular program. With the small church program, actually, we identified a number of small churches that were sort of at a point where, you know, they were questioning and were coming to the presbytery with questions of, you know, how are we sustainable? And in that case, we actually went out proactively to a number of small churches and offered them not the funding, but the programming aspect of it, and a really in-depth assessment of their church and the finances and the facility and the community that they serve, and then offered training and guidelines and materials to conduct these small group meetings to actually have very specific conversations with their congregation to help them kind of get further down the path as well. So in terms of, you know, who applies, who gets in, who doesn't, generally when people are applying, we're aware. And we would encourage all churches to apply. And in fact, that kind of leads us to where we are next, as we're trying to figure out what the next step is. What's the next group of churches that could use some programming, and how do we identify those, and how do we you know, make this program available to everyone, but make sure that it addresses the needs of the churches appropriately.
Right. For the salary supplement program, there were already kind of a set of churches that met the criteria. Nearly all of them have already either applied or been through the program at this point. And the small church program is where we see some more opportunity. But as Kathy says, we still have funds available, and we still want to be able to help the churches who may not be struggling, but especially in this post-COVID time where they're kind of reevaluating where they might want to go or what the needs are in their community, and how we help them do that. And so that's what we're looking to put together.
So Lisa, we've talked about you know, what's to come, and we've had a ton of recipients, it sounds like, of this grant for the programming. So tell us about some of the things that have come from this and what you've seen.
Well, it's been a real gift to be a part of this, and just to even bear witness and go alongside with these churches as they go through the process. Both Kathy and I and our staff liaison, the Reverend Barbara Wilson, are trained ourselves as facilitators for some of their work. So we've been really kind of hands-on with that. We used a curriculum called New Beginnings, but then we trained in that curriculum so that we could help the churches. We enlisted a few other volunteers from the Presbytery of Chicago, Stuart Jameson and Maggie Shreve and Edie Lenz, and they've been amazing. Aha moments. I'm thinking about all the programming that is just bursting out of First Chicago in Woodlawn. They continue to meet with their community. They have really deep relationships there to see what's needed, and how they can continue to connect. So they've made their space available to community groups. They're having movie nights right now. What else did they do? They did something with music. And then Morgan Park, they started applying for mission grants, and the most recent one, they developed a whole concert series over the course of a year to get people into the building. I think their jazz and barbecue might have started out of some of the discernment pieces too. They didn't get a separate grant for that, but those are some things that I'm really excited about. And there's more. I mean, every time we go through one of these retreats with either a cohort or a small group of these churches, you just can't continue to hear more stories. Vida Nueva with the mental health, physical health, and spiritual health, and the programmings that they've developed around that has been really inspiring as well. And I get to brush up my Spanish. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, Kathy, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Lisa has said. And I would also comment too that for me, it's been a joy to see these cohorts form and the connections between the pastors
Yeah, that's been really
form. And I think, our group of the original group of 7 pastors is going through coaching together. They meet monthly. In fact, they had initiated monthly meetings on their own before we started that piece of the programming. So for me, it's been nice to see the cohorts form, and also a little greater connection to the presbytery too, for some of these congregations as a result. But that's happened sort of with all of our groups, with all 3 groups, is that there is a real kind of sense of team with these groups.
Thank you, Lisa and Kathy, for sharing your stories with us. I'm Leanne Nolan for Different Drummers in the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.